Hello everyone, we will regularly bring you stories you like. My wife and I are 36 years old and have been married for exactly 8 years. The whole situation is even worse because our anniversary was 2 weeks ago. Anyway, all you really need to know is that we don't have any children, and I've always enjoyed watching TV and movies. It may sound boring, but she doesn't have any other major hobbies, and I used to play video games, but I lost interest as I got older. So, and this is important, there's a show that airs that I kind of like and my wife enjoys. I don't want to reveal too much about it, but it's about to enter its 4th season and is quite popular. A particular actor on the show has always piqued my wife's interest, which can be very annoying because I've worked with women who obsess over attractive celebrities. It can be tiring, it could be right in the room, and they'll begin gushing about him. However, if you did the same thing with a supermodel, she would not speak to you for a week. Double standard anyway. Let's call the actor. No one, so I don't have to give too much away. I'm trying not to get myself into any trouble if I'm susceptible to it. He is not popular. If you watch the show in question, you will recognize his face. Most people haven't seen him in anything else, so he isn't an A-list actor like William Dafoe or Leonardo DiCaprio. It's difficult to even call him a bister because his only well-known production is a television show. Sure, his filmography page includes several other films and shows, but none of them were ever popular. And as a co-pilot, I believe I'm in a good position to make that claim, so... Oh yeah, I'm going to call him a SE-lister, and it's not out of spite for what happens later. So let me take you back to a conversation I had with my wife in the fall and have been reminded of several times since she saw the guy on TV and blurted out nonsense about how handsome he is, how hot his body is, how sexy his vows and so on. Then unexpectedly, she says, "I want him to be my hall pass." I was perplexed by this, so I asked her to explain what a hall pass is, because it only fits in a high school context in my mind. So it made no sense. Well, I'm sure most of you know what a hall pass is, but for those who don't, it's a stupid slang term for the one person with whom someone in a committed relationship can sleep without being considered cheating. When she said this, I scoffed and told her how stupid she was for even saying such a thing to me. It devolved into a full-fledged argument that night, but before I went to bed, I realized it was almost impossible for her to ever sleep alone. It was primarily the disrespect of, in a desire outside of her sexuality, that got to me. If you have that much lust for someone, fine, but admitting it to your husband is crazy. For the next few days, I was still reeling from the disrespect, and I even considered claiming Megan Hardy as my hall pass in front of her, but it seemed childish. At that point, I decided to act like a grown-up and told her how offended I was by the hall pass comment and her desire for him in general. She apologized, but she didn't seem to understand why. So we left it at that over the next few months, perhaps 6 or 7. She slipped up at least 5 times while watching a show or seeing him on social media, and the first 2 times I took her off, she would make stupid comments about Nolan's stunning beauty. However, I eventually gave up because I was tired of having uncomfortable conversations. However, it made me wonder why she found it so difficult not to do things that were disrespectful to me. I've made mistakes in the past about things she's expressed displeasure with, but I've never repeated the offense more than once, so obviously, over time, it became a sore spot for me, and I began to get irritated every time I saw a space in the show, despite the fact that he was just a face on a screen. So there's really nothing to be concerned about, right or wrong. A convention was coming to the city next to us, and my wife found out about Nolan's meet and greet event through his Instagram page. She didn't ask me before going, but instead told me she was going and spent the 2 weeks leading up to it gushing non-stop. At the time, I adored her, but the obsession irritated me greatly. In fact, I became so frustrated that I blurted out, "I don't think it's a good idea for you to go." If you're going to act obsessed like this. She just gave me a horrible look, but I decided to insist, saying, I really don't think you should go. It's a city over, and you didn't even consult me before making your decision. She said nothing and simply left the room. And honestly, I was relieved to have gotten it off my chest. So I let it go. I assumed she had understood the point. Well, until the day of the meet and greet. When I noticed her wheeling her suitcase to the door, when I asked her where she was going, she said she was going to another city for a meet and greet. I think my mouth dropped open because I didn't believe she would go through with it. I jot down the path I'm taking with Sui, a friend who had twice been unfaithful to her husband. The poor chap had no idea, and we're going to spend the night in a hotel, so I won't have to come back at night. I will be back tomorrow morning. To say I was enraged would be an understatement, because the entire situation was extremely sensitive for me, but as I did, I would let her go and deal with the aftermath. After, in retrospect, that was a bad idea, but I didn't intend to physically restrain her, so I suppose I had no choice. I should have tried harder to stop her from leaving, but I suppose if I had, I wouldn't know what I know now. So the entire day passed with basically no communication from my wife, other than her sending a dry text informing me when she arrived at the bus station and when she arrived in the other city, and then she went silent. Until the next morning, I swear I called her at least 7 times at regular intervals, but I never heard back, which was extremely stressful. We weren't on good terms, but that didn't change the fact that I suspected she was in danger in a city she didn't know. Well, I ended up becoming an Instagram stalker. I kept checking the conventions and no one's stories, hoping to see my wife. And I finally saw her in one of the approximately 34 stories that were posted, so I knew she arrived safely at the convention. It helped me put to rest a bit, but I was still pretty pissed. 7 missed calls, and she didn't have the decency to return one of them. It would just be added to the list of issues we had when she got back anyway. As she promised the next morning, I was woken up by the sound of the door to our house closing. My wife had gotten back from her trip, and as much as all I wanted to do in that moment was go back to sleep. There was a discussion that needed to be had. She came upstairs and found me sitting on the bed. I remember her pulling a really awkward smile as she went to push her suitcase into the corner. How was the meet and greet? Did you meet no one? I tried to say with as little edge as possible, but I'm certain some came out. The meet and greet was nice. Yes, I did meet him. Along with a few others from the show. It was nice to see these people in real life. I'm glad you got to experience that now. We need to. Before I was able to get out the rest of the sentence, she jumped in tears, welling in her eyes already. I know, baby. I'm so sorry. I should have asked you if you were fine with me going, instead of just choosing to go on my own. That wasn't fair at all, and I was annoyed with how things went earlier on, which was why I didn't pick your calls, but I'm so sorry. The calls, that night Susie and I went to a bar, and I left my phone behind, so I didn't know you called, to be honest. I was disarmed by her apologizing, because that was extremely unlike her. So while it was supposed to make me feel a lot better, something just felt off about it. But I decided that I'd do the thinking later. I asked if I could see some of the pictures that she took, and she obliged, happily. Now it was, at this point, that I noticed a red flag. She angled the phone away from my face as she was looking for pictures. It was subtle, but I'm sure it was intentional. Only after opening a picture did she let me see the picture she took, including some smiling. Beside no one, though, she was the one holding her phone and swiping through them. If you have a Samsung Galaxy phone, you'll know that when you're in the gallery and scrolling through images, there's a little bar at the top of the screen that contains thumbnails of all the photos and videos in that folder. I saw something there It was tiny, but it looked like a large swath of skin tone, like some section of a naked body. I don't think she took that into account when she was showing me the photo, and again, I really couldn't say with any certainty what I was looking at. It came chronologically after the convention events, though. That much was clear. I let her keep showing me the images until she was through, and I made the expected comments about no one being good-looking, how I was glad she had met her favorite, and a lot of other jazz. But I know what I need to do as I was saying all of this, so once I was done, and she was done, I encouraged her to go and take a shower to freshen up, and she agreed to do so with a big smile. Once I heard the water start running, I grabbed her phone right away and went to her gallery. There was one video at the very last piece of media in her gallery, and I played it right away. It started off in a dimly lit room. It looked like a hotel room with soft warm lights, and there was someone close to the camera. I could hear voices, but it couldn't turn up the volume because I didn't want her to hear, but the person near the camera seemed to be propping it up, and once they got it stable, they moved away from it. It was my wife. She was naked. She went to lie down on the bed, and it seemed like she was waiting for something. Suddenly, the voices I could hear got a bit clearer, as it seemed someone else emerged from the bathroom. The person was naked too, and I didn't even need to see the face clearly to see that it was no one. He moved towards my wife and climbed onto the bed. The video was 11 minutes long, and I had to stop there. I couldn't watch any more. I quickly sent the video over to my phone, cleared any evidence from her, and I left the house. I didn't know where I was going, but my head was swirling and my heart was pounding. I think I watched her like 20 minutes before. I decided it was time to watch the video. I had taken off her phone. Watching it in full was horrible for me. Is there really anything worse than watching your wife get pounded by some actor that you've started to hate because she likes him so much? Why did she actually get the chance? Did she throw herself at him? Did he actually like her? What was going on, honestly? It was giving me a headache, and I felt so broken. There was nothing I could have done different, and I recognized that much. I didn't have much in my head as to what I was going to do next, but I know I have to divorce her, that much. A fool could tell you. See, being cheated on feels like crap. But it literally could have been anyone else in the world, and it wouldn't have hurt this much. That's when I knew I would have to get back at her, and I'd have to make it hurt. So I eventually headed back home, told her that had to go for a walk because I was feeling nauseous, and then I did my best to continue to act normal. It's been a full week since I found this out, and she's been exceptionally bubbly every time she smiles at her phone. I don't know if she's busy chatting with Nolan or something. I've become so paranoid, and I'm tired of feeling like this. I need to make her hurt as much as I hurt right now. And that's why I need help, because I'm blank on exactly what I can do. I'd love to hear what devious plans I can come up with that I can realistically deploy. Honestly, any suggestions are welcome. Hey, at least, now why she was so eager to attend the meet and greet. Guess she wasn't just there for the autographs and selfies. And who knew? Conventions could be such great networking events for extramarital affairs. Nothing says payback like hitting her where it hurts her wallet. Plus, imagine the look on her face when she realized that her little fling ended up costing her half of everything. Update 1. Hey everyone, it's been a few weeks since my last post, but I've got quite a few updates for you on how things have been going down. I read through pretty much every comment on my original post, and I have to say thank you to everyone for really helping me out. My mind felt like it was in a bog, but I was able to find some clarity, so I'll let you know how things went down. The first thing I did was call up a divorce lawyer. I had a close friend who went through a messy divorce, but managed to get a pretty good hand dealt to him in the end, so he referred me to his lawyer. From back then, we started to get to work. The next thing I did was call up Susie. I was a very close friend. I asked her to let us meet up, and she agreed to that. So we met at a bar. Now Susie is loose, let me put it like that. Part of me was tempted to get with her. to destroy my wife's friendship with her. But it wasn't the time, if it ever would be. But the whole point of meeting up with her was that if anyone knows anything about what had gone down between my wife and no one that ceased actor she slept with, it would be Susie. Susie is a drinker, so as long as there are shots being paid for by someone else, it's easy to get her mouth running. We had some drinks and shots, she had a lot more than me, and engaged in a bit of small talk. Before we got to the point where she was wasted, I told her I was planning to surprise my wife with a designer bag, and I asked her what she would recommend. She asked on and on about Chanel and Hermes, and I remember none of the details because that was just meant to be what she would remember now. Once I noticed that she was really under the influence, I struck. So Susie always told me everything I know, that she slept with knowing that actor. Through her haze, her eyes widened for a second before she went back to normal. How did that happen? I'm just curious, and she refused to tell me. She took another drink, swaying in her seat, before letting me know how my wife had been excessively flirty with no one and had passed him a paper with her number on it. My wife is attractive, and as much as I hate her right now, I can admit that apparently she had waited until much later, and no one had actually sent her a text that was simply a hotel and a room number more famous. Actors probably wouldn't have done something so stupid, but he's not a huge player in Hollywood. So what about the tape? Did he know? She made that. That was a suspicion of mine. No one might not have known. My wife took a video, and if he didn't, that had a lot of potential. A lot again. Susan seemed a little shocked that I knew so much, probably surprised that my wife actually came clean. But yeah, she confirmed to me that my wife had taken it secretly. She also let me know that she had watched it along with some of her other girls, and that was infuriating. My wife was basically becoming a porn star for her friends, but I knew I was going to take out the trash very soon. I got all the info I needed from Susie with the entire conversation recorded, and I ordered her a ride to take her home. Hopefully Susie wouldn't remember all this in the morning. I was trying my best not to tip my soon-to-be ex-wife off early as time went on. The lawyer said things were a go, so one night, a few days later, when we were watching Nolan's stupid show, I told my wife that I wanted to get a divorce. She actually choked on the soda she was drinking and spluttered for almost a minute. She was fine. She looked at me nearly hysterical, asking whether I was joking over and over, but I told her that I wasn't. I thought I'd prepared for this part, but it was extremely awkward. I really didn't want to reveal everything I knew. Yet in the end, I could take all her questioning and crying, so I left the house. She called me 21 times that night, but I didn't pick up a single call the next morning. I arranged with the lawyer and had her serve the divorce papers at work. Needless to say, that was embarrassing for her. After I got the confirmation, I went back home because she'd know the reason for the divorce. She came back home within 2 hours of getting served. When I spotted her, it was clear she had been crying for a long time. She came up to me, got on her knees, and started crying all over my knees, trying to say something, but it only came out as a lot of loud mumbling. It was irritating. It went on for like 20 minutes, and every time I would push her away, she'd start wailing even louder. When I reached my limit, I very sternly asked her to go upstairs to pack her things. She kept crying and crying, and at that point I managed to hear her saying how sorry she was, how it was a mistake, and on. When I heard the mistake part, I actually laughed and shoved her off my knee. She looked at me sadly from the carpet, and I stood up and left the room. In a few hours, she was packed and out of the house. Apparently, she's going to go and stay with Susie, who, even if she remembers anything about that night, certainly won't volunteer that she fed me with info anyway. What's left for me is for the divorce to be finalized, because I still have one major trick up my sleeve, but I need things to be officially over. Before then, hopefully I won't lose interest in revenge, but we'll see. Friends calling up Susie for some gossip juice was a genius move, liquid courage, could spill so many secrets, and serving her those divorce papers like a dish serve, cold ice, cold talk about dropping a bombshell. Hope she enjoyed her little sobfest on your knees, because now it's time for her to pack her bags and hit the road. Adios, Signora. You've got one last trick up your sleeve, and I'm itching to find out what it is. OP Update 2, it feels like it's been AG, but it has just been under a year. However, I'm finally back with what should be a final update, and boy is it good. So we finalized the divorce, and it's not a process I'd want to go through again. It was a lot of back and forth, a lot of stale meeting, and just a lot of stress, but it is finally over. I'm going to have to pay alimony, but thankfully her infidelity, which she did a poor job of denying, and which I was able to make easy work, proving, made the payments a lot less heavy. Plus, the payment terms won't be for very long in the process. I exposed Susie and everything she had to let me in on, which was certainly salt to the wound of my wife. A lot of money was split, but I kept the house after an annoyingly long battle on that, and that was good enough for me now. Once things were clear, this is where I was able to have fun. I had held on to that video since I snatched it off of her phone. I mean, no one is ceased, but he's still famous, and there's nothing Hollywood loves more than gossip. So who did I hit up first? TMZ. Yep, I let them know what I had for them, and I did a very good job of anonymizing, even though I didn't think they snitch on sources. I'm not used to the tabloid lifestyle, so I was trying to be as careful as possible. Once I proved I had what I claimed they had, I got to talking with a journalist from the tabloid and even made a bit of change off of it. Not much, but not too little. I must have refreshed TMZ 100 times after that, waiting for when they'd go live with the story. It wasn't the same day, but it eventually showed up on their website the next day. My favorite touch in the article, they used the name I provided. After all, everyone wanted to know who the mystery woman who got the chance to sleep with Nolan was, and they made it clear that no one was unaware of the recording using the same throwaway email account I used for the correspondence with TMZ. I sent a link to the article to my ex-wife's email address. At this point, all I could do was wait, especially because I wouldn't directly see what was going on in her life and how she would respond to the article. That's what I thought, at least until she knocked on the door of the house that used to be for both of us. 2 days later, she seemed crazy, and she kept saying, "I know it was you, admit it was you." I kept playing dumb, but I was doing it in an intentionally over-the-top way, because I wanted her to know it wasn't just karma, some universal force punishing her. She needed to know it was me, and I could almost see the point where she realized I was playing coy. It's like she snapped right then, and she lunged for my throat, clawing and striking. I fell over with the force when she jumped at me with. But it wasn't hard for me to get her off me. Thankfully, a neighbor had seen the whole thing. All her noise attracted his attention, and the police were there in some minutes after the incident. Yes, I pressed charges, which was very satisfying. Most of her family live in other states, and she and Susie had fallen out, so I hoped it took her some time to get someone to post bail for her. Anyway, the assault charge was just a cherry on top for me. I didn't plan for that to happen. The real big thing was her going to court for unlawful surveillance. She recorded no one without his consent, and even though she wasn't responsible for the leak, it only existed because she made it illegally. The case went on for quite some time, especially because no one wanted punitive damages for the harm that leak caused. His career. Apparently, he lost a job in some movie series aimed at younger audiences. Because of that made me feel good. Good, unsurprisingly, his lawyers were a lot higher end than what my wife could afford. She took a bunch of my money, but I was glad to see her wasting it on the consequences of her actions. I genuinely made me very happy every time I heard an update on the case, whether it went her way or not. A certain headline called her a groupie. That was fun. To cut a long story very short, she had to spend 2 months in jail and pay a $11,000 fine. As far as I'm concerned, she got off fairly easy, but I'm allowed to be vindictive, aren't I? Well, fellows, now that things have settled down, she's in jail right now, which is fine. I feel so much better, and I feel very satisfied. All I can say is that if you get a sign that someone is cheating on you, run and never look back. Plus, if you can get revenge in the process, never let the chance go. That's it for me. Take care of not everyone is as lucky as Kim Kardashian. Here is the next story. Jacob Kingston indulged in a sip of whiskey before reaching for his tablet. His wife's text notified him of another late night at work, leaving him to fend for dinner alone. Jacob, a man of meticulous habits, swiftly devised a plan. With the evening unexpectedly free, he resolved to relish a succulent cheeseburger, delve into a captivating book, and uncork a prized bottle of whiskey he had been saving for just such an occasion as he savored the amber elixir. He set aside his tablet, pondering his circumstances. With each sip over the past 6 months, a man and a Jacob's wife of 6 years had been logging numerous overtime hours when he first tied the knot. They established a financial arrangement, both deposited an equal sum into their joint account for bills and vacations, while maintaining separate personal savings, checking and retirement accounts inaccessible to each other. Amanda's fixed salary meant her income didn't rise, with the additional workload maintaining a steady amount. Whether she worked 40 or 60 hours a week with their separate accounts, Jacob remained unaware of the extent of Amanda's overtime earnings. Their contributions to the joint account far exceeded expenses, resulting in a substantial surplus before their marriage. Amanda insisted on maintaining separate accounts, a condition Jacob accepted when they met. Jacob's business faced turbulent times amid a sluggish economy. There were stretches when he chose not to pay himself, a plight familiar to many business owners, where creditors often come before personal paychecks. Despite financial strain, Jacob adamantly refused layoffs, dipping into his personal savings to uphold his commitment to job security. It was a relentless march forward, each day ending with closed shop doors and the weight of debt pressing harder upon him. Amanda, employed as a staff accountant at a Fortune 500 company, maintained a deliberate distance from Jacob's business affairs, fearing its potential collapse amid challenging times. Jacob, conscious of this concern, shielded Amanda from the financial strain by relying on his savings, sparing her any burdens. Though occasionally challenged to fulfill their joint account obligations, Jacob consistently contributed his share, trusting that the adversity would eventually subside. Jacob not only endured, but flourished amidst adversity. Inheriting 3 auto repair shops from his father, he transformed them into a thriving chain of 12 locations within a few years, with plans to expand to 20 in the near future. Despite the profitability of his enterprise, Jacob opted for a modest salary, channeling the bulk of profits back into the business. Each location boasted top-of-the-line tire equipment capable of handling any wheel size, while state-of-the-art diagnostic tools enabled technicians to address virtually any vehicle issue from North American, Asian, and European manufacturers, except those from France. Despite their professional successes, began to surface in Jacob and Amanda's marriage, casting a shadow over what should have been the happiest period of their lives. This was the second marriage for Jacob and Amanda. Jacob's first wife died under tragic circumstances. She was the only woman close to him, as his mother passed away when he was in middle school. It took Jacob several months to recover from Rory's death. His dad appointed an acting manager at the store Jacob ran. This gave Jacob time to grieve for the wife and children he would never have. Jacob might never have recovered if his father hadn't suffered a fatal heart attack one night while driving home from his office store. It made Jacob forget his pain and focus on business people's livelihoods depended on it. As Jacob strolled past, a mechanic apprentice recklessly removed the radiator cap, resulting in scalding antifreeze splashing onto Jacob's chest, leading to an emergency room visit. The bustling waiting area teemed with the typical mix of visitors found in any city. Despite his unfortunate appearance, drenched in a greenish fluid with a faintly sweet yet unpleasant odor, Jacob seemed unassuming as he occupied an empty seat. A tall, attractive brunette, nursing hub, and a L-limp made her way toward Jacob and settled into the vacant seat beside him with the air packed both Jacob and the brunette. Amanda knew they were in for a lengthy wait as they exchanged tales of their injuries. Amanda had twisted her ankle during an after-work run. They also shared snippets of their lives, and instant connections sparked between them, leading Jacob to boldly invite Amanda to dinner, an invitation she eagerly accepted. Their chemistry was palpable, quickly solidifying into a relationship. Amanda, scared by her previous marriage, marred by emotional abuse and infidelity, made it clear from their first date that she had no tolerance for cheating. Despite this, their bond deepened, culminating in marriage 15 months after their initial meeting. As Jacob sipped his whiskey, he couldn't help but reflect on his marriage. The old joke rang in his mind. "We've had a happy marriage for 5 years. Unfortunately, we got married 6 years ago in the early years." Jacob and Amanda reveled in ecstatic happiness. They laughed, danced, and shared intimate moments. Frequently, their connection seemingly unbreakable. However, challenges arose after Amanda completed her MBA and transitioned to a new role as an accountant in a Fortune 500 corporation. Jacob wholeheartedly supported her career aspirations, desiring nothing but happiness and success for his wife as the retirement of a senior vice president loomed. Amanda eyeing the opportunity for a promotion, with her senior director's impending promotion leaving a vacant position. Confident in her abilities, she set out to demonstrate her enthusiasm for the role. However, over time, Jacob noticed a change in Amanda's behavior. Kendall, theater director, grew increasingly curt with Jacob, seemingly finding fault in everything he did. Amanda, too, began to show disdain for Jacob's profession, reducing him to nothing more than a mere mechanic, a grease monkey in her eyes. Their conversations became laced with disrespect, and Amanda's constant frustration and anger towards Jacob became a toxic element in their marriage to avoid him. Amanda buried herself in overtime work, and even when at home she was glued to her phone, texting incessantly. Jacob grew to resent Amanda's phone, which seemed to consume her attention. She guarded it fiercely, concealing her messages and laughing at them in secrecy. It became regular for her to sleep with the phone tucked beneath her pillow. Then the scenario took a terrible turn, plunging into violence. Amanda's fury was a persistent habit, often showing itself in harsh statements and insults. When she lost her fury, she soon cooled down and made amends, and when Jacob was the object of her fury, her remorse led to a magnificent night of reconciliation. But Jacob began to detect a worrying tendency. Amanda's tantrums were becoming more frequent and powerful, and the intimacy that had made her fury more palatable seemed to be diminishing, and he concerned about the health of their relationship a month ago. Amidst an argument caused by Amanda over seemingly small concerns, she crossed a boundary by slapping Jacob, an act utterly out of character for both of them in their 6 years of marriage. The shock of the slap echoed through Jacob to his core, leaving both parties shocked. Amanda instantly realized her error, giving apologies and begs for pardon. However, the episode predicted darker days to come. A week later, emotions escalated further when Amanda berated Jacob for not attending to the oil change light in her order, despite Jacob's explanation that the automobile was entitled to free oil changes for the initial 3 years. Amanda's aggravation spilled out. Turning to insults fired up with her behavior, Jacob thought he'd have enough. He addressed Amanda, expressing his dissatisfaction of her choice to acquire the pricey and unreliable German car, reminding her that its maintenance was her responsibility. Amanda's reaction was intense. She grabbed her coffee cup and tossed at Jacob, nearly missing him as he ducked the missile. Surprised by her aggressiveness, Jacob glanced at Amanda with bewilderment, met with her cold, uncaring gaze as she turned and walked away without a word. Jacob took a sip of his whiskey as he heard the garage door proclaim Amanda's presence. With a rapid movement, he grabbed up his cell phone and sent out both a text and an email he had prepared earlier. They were duplicates, destined for the same destination, and with identical information. For Jacob, redundancy was a key notion. As the lyrics of Tennessee Ernie Ford's song resonated in his mind, he believed in the wisdom of backup plans. If the right one don't get you, then the left one will. As Amanda strolled past the living room, her sight landed on to Jacob resting comfortably in his recliner with a glass of whiskey in hand. "I'm going to change, and then we need to discuss some strange behavior on the joint account," Amanda announced, without waiting for Jacob's response, before disappearing into the bedroom. Minutes later, the sound of the shower filled the air. Both Jacob and Amanda had set up notifications on their banking application to notify them of any abnormalities Jacob had received. The same notifications that now seemed to be causing Amanda anxiety. With the CI, he placed aside his iPad and took a sip of whiskey, awaiting Amanda's return. 15 minutes later, Amanda came from the bedroom dressed in black yoga pants and a white midriff-bearing T-shirt, her hair still moist from the shower. Despite the absence of makeup, she projected a remarkable attractiveness, her thin, athletic body grabbing Jacob's attention as she settled onto the sofa opposite him. "Do you know about these deductions from the joint account?" Amanda asked, her tone holding a note of reproach as she held out her phone, displaying their bank statement with the substantially reduced sum earlier in the day. It had indicated a balance of over $30,000, but now it exhibited a meager DO12. Jacob nodded in acknowledgement. "The $12,000 is debit to PDC, that's Pendragon Security Consultants. I paid them to surveil you for a month and document your affair with your boss, and the $18,000 AC2CD, that was the retainer for Simone's Kennedy and Dixon, my divorce attorneys," Jacob explained calmly, taking another sip of whiskey as he observed Amanda's reaction. Tears welled in Amanda's eyes, her mouth opening and closing in a desperate search for words. Her face flushed with emotion, cycling from fear, grief and wrath, leaving her momentarily speechless. Jacob witnessed her distress, witnessing the fast shift of emotions, but it wasn't until he grabbed for his whiskey glass that Amanda seemed to compose her thoughts and find her voice. It didn't signify anything. Amanda eventually spoke, her words laced with desperation. "I merely got carried away by an end. I don't want a divorce, weren't you? The one who said she had zero tolerance for cheaters. What does that mean to you?" Jacob countered. "If you ever cheated on me, I would divorce you." "You," Amanda replied, her hands gripped in her lap, her gaze fixated downwards. "That sounds like a prudent posture," Jacob commented dryly. "I don't want it to force." Amanda reiterated, "What did you imagine would happen when I found out?" Jacob pressed. "I didn't think he would find out." Amanda revealed her honesty, cutting through the tension. "I believed it would finish, and we could go back to normal." And what about the disrespect? The anger was, I just supposed to overlook that Jacob challenged. I never disrespected you, and there was no abuse. Amanda objected, her voice raising slightly in defense. You were in our bed with him. Jacob questioned, his tone stern. Amanda gasped, her face straining of color. Yes, she confessed gently, but I didn't mean to disrespect you. Well, that's just amazing, as long as you didn't aim to disrespect me. Then I believe it's all forgiven? Jacob answered, his tone tinged with boiling wrath. You slept with your lover in our bed in her home, and you don't realize how it was absolutely horrible to me. And you stated there wasn't any abuse. Jacob scoffed incredulously. You smacked me and slammed a coffee cup at my head. That's textbook abuse. We can move past this. I don't want a divorce. Amanda persisted, her voice tinted with urgency. We can seek guidance from a marriage counselor. Jacob shook his head forcefully. Our marriage wasn't the issue. Your infidelity was counseling is vital, but not to rescue our marriage. You ought to address whatever issues like you to cheat. If your lover were accessible, you'd be out the door in a hurry. I'm not your backup plan. I don't want a divorce, Amanda repeated adamantly. You'll alter your mind. Jacob observed wryly during their chat. Amanda's phone had been vibrating continually, with notifications which she had been ignoring in favor of pressing her case to Jacob as another call came in. She signed an Asian, prompting Jacob to gesture towards her phone. You might want to take that. He proposed. Amanda rose from the sofa and retreated to the bedroom for privacy. Meanwhile, Jacob seized the chance to write a message on social media, his fingers pounding furiously on his phone. Amanda's muffled voice reached his ears, followed by a loud exclamation. He did what a few minutes later, Amanda returned to the living room, her face flushed with wrath and her eyes contracted. In fury, you told his wife. Amanda's scream rang through the room. How could you try to wreck his marriage? You had no right. They have 2 little boys. How could you be so callous to her? You horrible jerk, you worthless piece of crap. I'll never forgive you for hurting her like that. Jacob observed Amanda with a mixture of amusement and incredulity. So let me get this straight. He's not a terrible jerk for cheating on his wife, and the horrible jerk for exposing his infidelity? Your logic is extremely wrong. Darling, you don't seem to believe you and your boyfriend are worthless pieces of garbage for lying and cheating on your marriages. But suddenly, I'm the villain for bringing light on it. Jacob shook his head, chuckling quietly. It was weird to witness the complex thinking of cheaters, even more so when it came from his own wife. This is a private affair between you and myself. You had no business intruding in their marriage. Amanda's face flashed scarlet with wrath. Your lover didn't hesitate to intervene in my marriage, so I had no qualms about interfering in his. If he's cheating on her with a co-worker who knows how many other women he's associated with, she has to protect herself and get tested for STI. He's not like that. He's clean. Amanda reacted defensively, since the first thing you do when you get home after a late day at work is take a shower. I'm guessing you're sleeping with him without protection. You should get tested too. I got tested for my own peace of mind, even if you and I haven't had anything since you started your affair. Amanda glanced at her husband in surprise. He had been aware of her affair for months and had quietly organized his response all the while, maintaining a veneer of normally who was this man. She thought she knew. You're just wanting retribution? You're pathetic, Amanda. Spat out her voice, tainted with astonishment once again. Jacob couldn't help but notice the persistent buzzing of her phone, overlooked amidst her onslaught of obscenities. As she temporarily paused, her phone began to ring. You might want to take the call, Jacob suggested, calmly, taking another sip of whiskey without a word. Amanda stormed towards the bedroom to answer her phone, Leaving Jacob to his own devices, grabbing the opportunity, Jacob hurriedly made a call on his iPhone, muttering into the receiver before activating the recording app, putting the phone strategically against the lamp on the end table. He assured that the chat session would be captured on video while keeping the line open for the other party. To hear it wasn't long until Amanda stormed back into the living room, her face distorted with wrath. "You put this on Facebook?" she yelled, her voice reverberating through the room. "And you tagged all my family and friends. You even tagged Pastor Derek." Jacob stayed composed, nodding in affirmation. "Yes, but I also shared it on LinkedIn, ensuring all your professional connections could view it too." Amanda's irritation and wrath bubbled over, erupting in a piercing scream before she tossed her cell phone at Jacob's head, anticipating the hit. He instinctively shut his eyes, bracing himself for the hit. The crash was far more severe than he had thought, nearly forcing him to lose consciousness as the phone slapped his forehead. Despite the shock, he managed to preserve his composure. He knew she was going to do something about it, and not replying her was one of the hardest he'd ever had to do. Amanda lunged across the gap between them, showering blow into Jacob's face. A punch to the nose caused his eyesight to fade momentarily. Eventually, he could no longer restrain himself and reflexively hit his face with his arms as Amanda brutally struck him amidst her screams of threats. Jacob's resolve approached its breaking point. Slowly, he pulled her away and climbed to his feet, placing distance between them with a love seat. He secretly prayed that the 911 operator he had dialed would dispatch help promptly. True to his hope, a squad car arrived just minutes later, exactly as he had envisioned. Amanda's glare pierced into Jacob with malicious ferocity, her mind racing with plans to retaliate against him, left right above the love seat before she could decide on a plan of action. The doorbell interrupted the uncomfortable silence you should probably acquire, that Jacob's voice remained steady, devoid of passion. Amanda's nostrils flared, her gaze narrowing as she locked eyes with Jacob for a minute. With a sharp turn, she marched towards the front door, flinging it open. Amanda found herself face to face with two policemen, confusion blended with wrath, as she engaged in a heated debate with the officers, firing accusatory glances back at Jacob. Between statements, though their speech was too distant for Jacob to decipher, Amanda's impassioned motions and pointed finger left little to the imagination. Eventually, she stepped aside to give the officer entry into their home, one of them making their way towards Jacob. "Mr. Kingston, I'm Patrolman Peter, and my partner is Patrolman Terry. Your wife indicated that there's been violence tonight. Can you tell me what's happening on? Did you lay a hand on her, Patrolman?" Peter queried. Shaking his head, Jacob disputed the accusation. "I questioned my wife about her affair, and she assaulted me," he recounted, indicating towards his face, where he could feel the sting of the hit from the hurled cell phone and the broken lip. "I'm the one who contacted 911. She's been getting increasingly violent lately. A month ago, she smacked me, and then a week later, she hurled a coffee cup at my head. It narrowly missed, but if it had hit, I would have ended myself in the emergency room. I have a recording of tonight's confrontation. Would you like to see it?" Patrolling, Peter's expression transformed. Evidently interested in viewing the evidence, Jacob completed a series of taps on his iPhone before handing it up to Patrolman Peter. With Fern's brows, the officer watched the video in silence, his demeanor shifting as he observed Amanda's hostile behavior towards Jacob. Turning back to Jacob, "Patrolman." Peter studied him skeptically. "It seems there was some chat before the recording. Did anything said exacerbate the situation?" Jacob shrugged. "She discovered out I had hired a private investigator to take her for a month, and then I shared the results with her affair partner's wife. Needless to say, she wasn't pleased. The cop chuckled. "You don't do things by half, to you." As the expression goes, I light my path forward by the light of the fires of the bridges blazing behind me. Jacob responded, "Dry fair enough, patrolman." Peter responded, with a toss of his head, a smile playing on his lips, withdrawing short to speak with his companion. They evaluated the situation, returned. They seemed to have reached a conclusion. "We're detaining your wife for domestic abuse and threats, patrolman." Peter informed Jacob I'd consider getting a restraining order, as Amanda was escorted out in handcuffs. She turned to Jacob, tears flowing down her face, pleading passionately. "Jacob, please don't let them do this to me if you've ever loved me. Make them let me go. I'll be good, I promise." Jacob rolled his eyes, collecting a business card from Patrolman Peter. "My emails on the card provide me the video." The officer directed as a squad car sped away. Jacob lost no time in contacting his attorney, Frank Simmons. It played out just as planned. She's been arrested and sent to jail. "Stay at home. Jacob, if she comes up again, you know what to do." Frank advised fleeing the courthouse the following morning. Amanda found herself accosted by a young blonde woman, seemingly unconcerned while she chewed her gum. "Excuse me," the blonde halted Amanda's way. "Are you Amanda Kingston?" Weirdly, Amanda confirmed her identity. "Yes, who are you?" "You been served." The blonde stated matter-of-factly, pushing a mantilla envelope into Amanda's hands before turning to depart. "What is this?" Amanda called after her. Her irritation? "Evident don't know, don't care." The blonde retorted, her voice fading as she went away. "But I'd say you're probably screwed, whatever it is." Frustrated, Amanda tore open the envelope to find a petition for dissolution of marriage. "What a bastard!" she exclaimed, her wrath spilling over as she turned to her parents for assistance. It had been a terrible morning for Amanda, taken out of her detention cell. Early, she had been transported to a holding facility within the courthouse, where she waited an anxious hour before meeting with her counsel with only one phone call. The previous night, she had sought out to her parents, who had hurried to get legal representation for her. Thankfully, they had secured a lawyer overnight, providing Amanda with some reassurance as she faced where hearing the judge had set Kendall's bond at $1,000, requiring her to either pay the full amount or enlist the services of a bail bondsman and pledge real property as collateral, paying 10% of the bond. Additionally, a restraining order was imposed, barring her from contacting her spouse or visiting his apartment, or employment arrangements were to be made through her attorney for retrieving her possessions from the residence initially. Amanda's lawyer protested to these requirements, but abandoned the opposition after being shown images of Amanda's husband leaving the courthouse. Amanda's parents treated her to a trip at McDonald's drive-through as a first order of business, having been put into Denton County Jail too late for dinner and roused early for her court appearance. She had missed breakfast the prior night. Amanda had forgone dinner, deciding instead to spend the evening in bed with her boss, Paul, her attempt to get leftovers. Upon returning home, had been thwarted, reflecting on how she ended up in this circumstance. She remembered the moment her evening took a sudden turn as she and Paul were enjoying time together. Amanda's phone buzzed, interrupting their moment of sensuality, expecting a text from Jacob. She glanced at her phone only to be faced with a low balance alert for her bank. Logging into the bank's app, she realized that their joint account was practically empty, with two big withdrawals totaling $30,000. A simple Google search of the pages returned no results. Amanda evaluated the options that could explain the depleted checking account. It may be a hoax or a banking issue, she reasoned, calling on her intellect. Another possibility loomed, one she reluctant to entertain. Jacob might have discovered her affair and emptied the account in response, yet she found it difficult to believe she knew her spouse well. He was not one to shy away from confrontation. If he suspected her adultery, he would have faced her straight. Jacob Kingston was not the type to ignore such concerns, despite her assurance. Amanda found herself in a dingy hotel room, lying next to her employer, wrestling with misgivings about her decisions throughout her life. Amanda had found things coming effortlessly to her. She was accustomed to being both the brightest and the prettiest girl in her class, though this often left her separated from her peers, who mistrusted her early on. She had learned to wield her attractiveness as a tool, deploying it without hesitation in her adolescent years. She issued high school lads in favor of older, more successful men with stable employment. College was a rehash of high school. If she had problems with her classes, she had affairs with professors. She graduated from college in 4 years with a finance degree. She explored law school, but thought she wasn't a strong enough student. To Amanda, her affair with Paul Ramirez, the senior director, she reported to bore no sentimental meaning. It was only a means to an end. Her road into adultery had begun during her career at Chase Bank, in her 2nd year, when she crossed paths with Anthony Cooper. Anthony, tasked to investigate probable money laundering activities, displayed a carefree air that immediately grabbed Amanda's interest. Boldly, she invited him for drinks, and by the end of their first date, they were in bed together. Amanda found herself enamored with Anthony within 2 months. They were cohabiting, and a year later, they tied the knot. Initially married life with Anthony was idyllic for Amanda. She adored him and was determined to guaranteeing his happiness together. They seemed wonderful. However, fissures began to develop after 4 years of marriage, during which they actively explored starting a family. Anthony had an opportunity to attend a 4-week training conducted by Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms. Although his absence would be temporary, Amanda understood the career rewards and pushed him to grab the opportunity. The first week without Anthony was manageable for Amanda, but as the days went, her loneliness intensified. By the 2nd week, aggravated by hormonal swings, her craving for Anthony deepened. As the 3rd week drew to a close, Amanda found herself teetering on the edge. Finally, in the 4th week, she surrendered to her vulnerabilities, agreeing to drinks with Bob Collins. Bob Collins, an ex-partner of Amanda's husband in the Denton County Sheriff's Department, had drifted apart from Anthony, though Amanda couldn't pinpoint the exact source of their divide. Nevertheless, she consented to meet Bob for drinks, retaining a faint hope of mending their disagreements. Besides, Bob's charisma and her own loneliness made the invitation intriguing. What harm could it do? Meanwhile, Anthony had excelled in the ADF class, emerging as the best performer as the last week arrived. His outstanding performance offered him the option to take the exam. Early passing would offer him an early leave. Failing would mean remaining until the class completed. Following his achievement, Anthony wasted no time in getting a ticket back home to surprise his wife, arriving in the early hours of the morning. He was dropped off by a neighbor, greeted by the sight of Bob's automobile sitting in their driveway. A flash of fear struck Anthony as he entered their darkened home, leaving his suitcase by the entrance as he tiptoed towards the bedroom. The room basked in the gentle glow flowing from the master bathroom, and Anthony got his phone and resumed shooting the slumbering couple. After capturing 30 seconds of footage, he snapped a few photographs before stashing the device away. Sauntering over to Bob's side of the bed, he delivered an impish slap. The scream that erupted out of Bob's mouth woke Amanda from her slumber. When she awoke, she was scared and disoriented. She saw Bob crying and holding his cheek with both hands. Her husband was standing over them, but for a second, her brain couldn't process what was occurring. Then everything fell into place. Amanda's visage shifted from shock to panic as she comprehended the enormity of the situation. Her soon-to-be ex-husband's wrath was evident as he made his ultimatum. "I'll return at 3 to grab my items. I anticipate you to be gone." By then, Anthony's voice seethed with wrath. "If I find you here, I won't be answerable for my actions. You're not worth jeopardizing my career or freedom." With a solid grip, Anthony grasped Bob by the hair, forcing their eyes to connect. His comments dripped with contempt. "You're despicable. I'll insure your wife and witness the footage. Consider your career and marriage." Over a final hit to Bob's nose left it bleeding as Anthony rushed out, leaving Amanda behind, reflecting on Anoni's despair upon learning her infidelity. Amanda felt a sting of remorse. Despite her attempts to reconcile, he remained persistent in his silence, commencing divorce processes. Her parents, attempting to soothe her, shifted the blame to her husband, portraying Anthony as the aggressor in rewriting history. Amanda remade herself as the victim, describing her departure as a daring escape from an oppressive relationship. Anthony's confrontation with Bob just strengthened her narrative further, confirming her place as the hero of her own story. Amanda's incident at Angstrom's department store in Dallas destroyed the carefully built facade of her tale, standing face to face with her ex-husband Anthony. Amanda felt a flood of emotions that she hadn't prepared, for Anthony was accompanied by a stunning woman, tall and athletic with blazing red hair, who appeared vaguely familiar. Amanda's heart skipped a beat as she observed the pram by her side. Amanda's voice faltered as she greeted him. "Hello, Amanda," Anthony replied, his tone devoid of warmth. Amanda extended her hand towards the woman. "I'm Amanda. I used to be married to Anthony." "Yes, I've heard of you," the woman, Melissa Parker, said as she shook Amanda's hand. A flush of humiliation crawled up Amanda's neck. "I'm sure you've heard mixed things, some good, some not so good." Melissa reacted equally. "I'm Melissa Parker. I'm Anthony's wife. This is our son, Anthony Jr." Amanda stared down at the sleeping newborn, her heart breaking with a mixture of longing and despair. "He's a gorgeous baby. You're fortunate to be married to Anthony. He's a good man." Amanda managed to, for a smile. "It was lovely meeting you again." "Anthony?" Anthony's glare pierced into her with a mixture of hatred and indifference as he hurriedly took Melissa and their child away, leaving Amanda alone with her thoughts amidst the bustling retail store days later. As Amanda tuned on to the local nightly news, she was astonished to see the woman she had observed with Anthony now gracing the screen as a newscaster. The parts fell into place. Melissa Parker was the missing link. Amanda proceeded on a Google search, uncovering Melissa's budding career in the media. Despite a tinge of jealousy, Amanda couldn't ignore the joy of witnessing her ex's new existence linked with hers. Night after night, Amanda battled conflicting emotions. Her tears indicate amount to the inner struggle, yet amid the emotional storm, a familiar narrative developed. Anthony was the instigator. Wasn't he? His new marriage was sure to falter, wasn't it? With this consoling concept, Amanda anchored herself to reality, pondering the repercussions of divorce. After hastily consuming her egg McMuffin, Amanda insisted her parents take her home. Her determination unshaken, ready to confront Jacob, she battled with the impending turmoil. "That's not a good idea, honey," her father cautioned. "I need to talk to Jacob. I need to convey to him what happened. We can work through this." Amanda insisted. Ken, her mother, intervened, concern engraved in her voice. "I don't think that a good idea," the judge said. "I don't care what the judge said," Amanda snapped at her mother. "Just take me home." As they stood outside her front door, Amanda's impatience grew. She rang the doorbell, but there was no response with each unanswered ring. Her frustration increased, culminating in a bombardment of hammering on the door. Inside, Jacob made a brief call, keeping the security chain in place before opening the door. "You're not allowed to be here. There's a restraining order to keep you." "Out way," Jacob stated forcefully. "I reside here," Amanda countered. "How can we fix our marriage if I'm not here?" Jacob, startled, stare met Amanda's fix. "I'm divorcing you." "We're not fixing anything. I'm not going to stay married to a lying, abusive cheater. You need to get out of here." He asserted the door. Notwithstanding her protests, angered Amanda continued to pound on the door, hurling insults and threats. Her parents joined in their voices, mimicking her pain, intensive in the chaos. "Open the door, Jacob, or I promise you're going to get injured," Amanda yelled. "Open the dang door." "You foolish monkey," Amanda's father added, his wrath spilling over. "I shall put you down, boy." Jacob took a drink of his coffee, his countenance a mix of disbelief and resignation, as he studied the footage shot by his doorbell camera. The arrival of the squad car, the officer's approach, and the subsequent exchange with his wife and her parents played out like a bizarre scenario as one of the officers rang the doorbell. In the footage, Jacob opened the door and letting the law enforcement inside. After validating his identity, the officer had inquired about the evident injuries on Jacob's face, prompting him to describe the events of the previous night last night. "I confronted my wife about an affair she's having. I hired a private investigator and have evidence of the affair." Jacob continued, referring to his wounded face during the confrontation. "She became aggressive and attacked me." Jacob handed the officer a copy of the restraining order filed against his wife, which banned her from returning to the residence. Then he showed the officer the video evidence shot on his phone, portraying Amanda and her parents making threats at his front door. The officer viewed the footage with a shake of his hand, his attitude expressing the ridiculousness of the scenario. "Well, this seems rather cut and dried." "Send me a copy of the film," he commanded, handing Jacob a business card. He then radioed for additional units, anticipating multiple arrests. "Stay indoors and watch the show on your phone. Do not exit your residence unless I tell you." Jacob nodded in acknowledgement, understanding the gravity of the situation unfolding before him as he prepared to manage the aftermath of his wife's violent outburst. That's precisely how it unfolded. The officer summoned his partner over for a consultation, and they checked the video on Jacob's phone before approaching Amanda and her parents. The three was told of their arrest for trespassing and menacing, with Amanda facing additional charges for violating the restraining order. With the entrance of 2 more squad cars, the officers proceeded to arrest Amanda and her parents. Chaos erupted as Amanda's mother became agitated. Amanda herself fell into tears and yelled abuses at the officers as her father sought to interfere and was soon brought to the ground. Show was a fairly tame way to characterize the scene. Jacob wasted no time and promptly called his attorney, leaving a concise message. Amanda and both of her parents were just detained. "I guess I'm married into a family of idiots." Robert Klein found himself battling with defeat and sorrow. The events of Friday night had put him, his wife, and their daughter in handcuffs, arrested for trespassing and uttering threats against their son-in-law, spending the entire weekend in jail. They waited their Monday morning hearing before a judge. Both Robert and his wife were slapped with restraining orders, instructing them to remain out of Jacob's home and employment. Meanwhile, Amanda had her bail revoked due to breaking the protective order and harassing Jacob, ensuring her protracted stay behind bars. Although Robert and his wife managed to gain their release, Amanda remained incarcerated indefinitely as he reflected on these events, as Robert couldn't shake the feeling of parental failure. Amanda, once his treasured daughter, has become a personification of entitlement and narcissism. Despite this understanding, she still retained a particular place in his heart. Throughout the weekend, Nicole, his wife, shared a cell with Amanda. Their conversations failed in secrecy upon her release. Nicole's behavior upon leaving jail hinted at a fresh drive, leaving Robert mystified as to its source and aim. Robert reached out to the attorney who had handled Amanda's last arrest, only to realize that he was conveniently unavailable due to a coincidence vacation, sensing a stroke of luck. Robert decided to seek legal assistance elsewhere. He scoured the yellow pages until he found an attorney prepared to meet him soon. Little did he know this impetuous decision would serve as a forerunner of danger. Kenneth Campbell, the attorney Robert came across, scarcely fit the usual image of a lawyer with a thin frame, receding hairline, and a visage suggestive of a bird of prey. Kenneth projected an aura of opportunism. Robert couldn't help recall a phrase from his distant literature studies, something about a gaunt and hungry appearance, while some lawyers resorted to fancy TV advertising or billboards. Kenneth appeared like the kind to sell his services in less respected settings, possibly even on Fox News, as Robert provided him with a business card from Amanda's divorce packet. Kenneth's predatory grin slipped into a scowl. Simmons, Kennedy, and Dixon. This unexpected twist left Kenneth clearly angry, prompting Robert to question what he had gotten himself into. "So your son-in-law is more of a tycoon than a grease monkey," Kenneth remarked, skepticism tainting his tone. Robert nodded. "Exactly. He's got a whole empire of auto businesses down. He gets his hands dirty." Kenneth refrained making additional questions, deciding to rely on his own study. He instantly turned to his computer and conducted a Google search on Jacob Kingston of Kingston Automotive 12. Thriving locations, impressive looks. Like we've hit the jackpot with a firm like that. Your divorce settlement might be considerable. And who knows, maybe he'll cover my fees too. Kenneth mused, his eyes glittering with anticipation, metaphorically rubbing his hands together at the idea of a rich case. Go screw yourself. Kenneth gazed at his cell phone, startled after leaving a message with Jacob's attorney Frank Simmons, who had just returned his call. Kenneth sought an urgent appointment with Jacob Kingston and his legal counsel to discuss temporary spousal maintenance. Frank's response was brief before he abruptly ended the call. Fuming, Kenneth dialed Frank Simmons's number again, fully prepared to give him a piece of his mind regarding professional respect among colleagues in the legal industry. "What part of go screw yourself?" "Did you not understand?" Frank Simmons had asked without greeting or preamble. "You want to play hardball?" "Then we'll play hardball," Kenneth said to himself as he placed his cell phone down on his desk. "Why didn't you inform me about the video?" Kenneth's voice reverberated through the room as he confronted his clients. "I walked into that conference room looking utterly foolish, finally managing to reach someone at Simmons, Kennedy, and Dixon." Kenneth was greeted by a first-year associate tasked with scheduling a preliminary conference. It was made clear that Kenneth's clients need not attend this initial meeting. The entire conference proved to be a dismal affair for Kenneth from the moment he stepped into the law office of 62 of his hasty departure. Each moment seemed designed to embarrass and undermine Kenneth Campbell, Esquire. It all started in the reception area where Kenneth announced himself to the receptionist. It felt as though he would have received warmer reception if a stray dog had suddenly morphed into a lawyer and strolled in with a briefcase. Redirected to a small conference room, he was left to wait, assured that someone would attend to him shortly. Kenneth seed in the cramped room for what felt like an eternity after Carol's dismissive instruction to wait when someone finally came to fetch him. It was a woman who appeared young enough to be a teenager. In Kenneth's eyes, she seemed no more than a child, and he couldn't help but underestimate her. Little did he know Carol Dixon was a Yale law graduate in her 30s, propelled by her natural talent and family connections to become a junior partner at her firm. Kenneth, oblivious to her accomplishments, writing her off with a single glance as Kenneth entered the conference room, he was taken aback to find Carol seated across from him. Her demeanor shifted from mild amusement to something more predatory as Kenneth outlined his client's demands. However, his shock turned to bitterness as Carol swiftly dismantled his arguments. They had evidence of your daughter's violent behavior, violations of the restraining order, and even death threats from you and your wife, not to mention the prenuptial agreement you conveniently forgot to mention. Carol stated coolly. Kenneth felt his pride wounded by Carol's words. The entire ordeal had been a humiliating blow to his ego, and he couldn't contain his frustration. "You've made me look like a rookie, not a seasoned lawyer with 30 years of experience," he snapped with a steely resolve. Carol delivered her verdict. "I'm terminating our representation of you. Find another lawyer to handle your mess, and here's my invoice for the time wasted. Now get out of my office." Keith stormed out, seething with anger and humiliation, realizing he had underestimated Carol Dixon to his own detriment. Amanda and her parents sat across from Jacob in the conference room, their expressions filled with resentment. Amanda had meticulously dressed herself, hoping to showcase what Jacob would be losing, but Jacob remained calmly indifferent, unfazed by her attempts to elicit regret for their impending divorce. The terms of the divorce were straightforward. There wasn't much to divide. They agreed to retain their respective possessions brought into the marriage. Jacob, having bought the house prior to their union, would keep ownership, a decision Amanda interpreted as a lack of commitment. Jacob, on the other hand, saw it as a prudent safeguard against uncertainty. In hindsight, both perspectives held some truth. As part of the settlement, Jacob insisted on the return of Amanda's wedding set, and in return, he handed over his own ring. Amanda placed her rings in an envelope and passed it to Jacob, who simply removed his ring and pushed it across the table to her throughout the meeting. His ring sat untouched, a silent testament to the finality of their decision as they stood. The weight of finality hung heavy in the air. Jacob felt compelled to ask Amanda the question that had lingered in his mind. "Why, Amanda? We had a good life together. I thought we loved each other. Why throw it all away for a fleeting affair?" Amanda's sign carried the weight of uncertainty as she met Jacob's gaze. "I wish I had a clear answer for you. Maybe it was boredom, restlessness, ambition, perhaps a blend of all three. What can I say to you? I regret betraying you. I regret the consequences, not the act itself. It's a part of who I am. But you were a good husband, I just a good wife. And maybe I never will be to anyone." Jacob nodded her words, confirming what he had suspected all along. Gathering her belongings, Amanda turned to leave, but Jacob's voice stopped her in her tracks. "Amanda," she turned back to him, meeting his gaze as he gestured to his wedding ring, still resting on the table. "Thank you for taking time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed this article, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a tale to tell about your or someone else's circumstance, please don't hesitate to contact me. Take care."